Hello and welcome to NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Today the show is coming to you from the Ol Pejeta Conservancy here in the county of Laikipia. We're grateful to Safari Link that flew us down here and also to the Serena Sweetwaters tented camp that have accommodated us. Now, Ol Pejeta is a truly special place, and this is why we're here. The NTV Wild documentary series aired Rhino Rescue, a story that followed the delicate translocation of rhinos within South Africa. The move from their homes to safer areas intended to protect them from poachers who kill rhinos for their horns. But the Rhino Rescue was released back in the year 2009, and 6 years later, the world is still grappling with the poaching crisis. There are only 3 northern white rhinos left in the entire world due to poaching, and they're protected right here in Kenya in the Ol Pejeta Conservancy. And with just 3 northern whites left, the species is literally on the brink of extinction. So right behind me in this enclosure is one of the very last northern white rhinos. And now I'm joined by Richard Vine. He is the CEO of the Ol Pejeta Conservancy. Richard, great to meet you and thank you for giving us exclusive access to these rhinos. Let's have a look.
Sure, let's go.
Thanks.
Go through the gate.
Richard, this is an incredible sight. Who is this?
So this is Sudan. Sudan is now referred to sort of globally as the last male standing. He's the last northern white rhino male left on the planet.
That is absolutely fascinating. Can we get closer to Sudan?
Yeah, you can. You know, he's a bit old. He's blind in one eye on the other side. So as long as we approach him from this side, and as long as we're just careful and talk gently to him as we approach him, we can get very close.
All
if you want to,
let's do that.
Come with me. Just go ahead and just follow Zachary, and he'll show you how to do it.
Sudan, hi. You know, you really don't realize the size of a rhino until you get up close like we are. This is Sudan, as Richard said, the last male standing northern white rhino, and he's here in Ol Pejeta. How old is Sudan?
So Sudan is now 43 years old, which makes him very old for a rhino. So in the wild, you know, rhinos probably wouldn't live much beyond 35.
Wow.
So the fact that he's got to the age of 43 is pretty impressive.
He's doing well so far, and there are 2 other northern white rhinos. Where are they and who are they?
Okay, so there's this where we are now is the what we call our endangered species enclosure, and it was originally set up for the northern white rhinos when they came here from the Czech Republic in 2009. Originally there were 4, 2 males and 2 females. The male Sunni died just over a year ago, so now we're left with Sudan plus 2 other females. One is Nain, she's also pretty old. I think she's 38, around about that sort of age. And Fatu, who's a lot younger. She's, I think, around about 14.
And
so there
where
are 3
are
in
they?
total.
Why aren't they here with Sudan?
Sudan, unfortunately, has got to the point where he's so old that he gets bullied by other rhinos, and he's a little bit shaky on his pins. You can see his back legs are sort of sitting back on their pasterns. So he's, you know, he's an old man, and really he needs to be kept a little bit segregated and a little bit sort of nurtured by himself. He's become friends with a young rhino called Ringo,
who we'll meet later.
Who's a southern white rhino.
Right.
And so he's got the company of another rhino, which psychologically is obviously good for him.
Of course. Richard, tell us, it is just shocking to learn that there are only 3 northern white rhinos left on the entire planet. How did we get to this tiny number?
Yeah, you know, it's an absolute tragedy that these rhinos would have been quite numerous across sort of eastern and central Africa as recently as 20 or 30, possibly 40 years ago. The reason their numbers have diminished to the point that there's only 3 left is because of poaching for their horn. So rhinos across Africa and across other parts of the world, such as the Far East, where rhinos exist, are all threatened for the same reason. Poaching for their horn, which is made of the same stuff as your fingernails,
Yep.
keratin. It has no medicinal powers whatsoever, but it's reputed in the Far East to be able to cure various diseases and that kind of stuff. So there's a high price that people are prepared to pay for rhino horn, and that's the reason they get poached. And that's the reason this animal here, or this species here, is on the brink of extinction.
It's really a tragic story to think that poachers are after rhino horn, and it's, as you said, just made out of the same thing as your fingernail. It's the same thing, keratin. Richard, you know, these rhinos are extremely precious, but what is their story? You mentioned that they came from the Czech Republic, all the way in Europe, here now in Kenya. We're very lucky to have them, but tell us more about their journey.
So we knew as recently as, about 2005, I suppose, we knew that the northern white rhino in the wild was on the brink of becoming extinct. At that time, there were around about between 25 and 30 left in the Garamba National Park in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we hatched a plan then to try to rescue 10 of those animals
and
to bring them to Kenya.
At that time, how did you know that there were a species under threat? Was it because of civil war in the region?
Yeah, you know, that the parts of Africa where this animal or this species used to exist tend to be fairly insecure, and there tends to be a kind of lack of government presence in those areas. So it made it easy for people wishing to poach them for their horn to kill rhinos living in that area. And it was pretty well known in the kind of conservation community that the last remaining stronghold for the northern white rhino was this place, Garamba National Park, and the population there was pretty well known, although it's a huge park.
Right.
And so we knew that it was on the brink of extinction at that time. So we hatched a plan to bring 10 here. That plan got mired in politics and never worked out. And since that time, that population has indeed become extinct. So in 2009, we'd been having discussions with a zoo in the Czech Republic called Dva Králové. They had a small population of northern white rhinos in that zoo, which had been pretty unsuccessful at breeding in zoo conditions over a long period of time. Not totally unsuccessful, but a little bit unsuccessful, and weren't breeding as regularly as was going to be necessary to save this species from extinction. So we hatched a plan with them to bring the last remaining 4 potentially reproductively active northern white rhinos here, in the hope that by bringing them back to a natural environment and into a more sort of natural social circumstance, which they would have experienced if they'd been living in the wild, that they would start to breed naturally and we could recover the species. Now, unfortunately, that never happened. They mated. They showed a lot of sort of typical rhino territorial behavior. They mated, but we never achieved a successful pregnancy. And since that time, one of the rhinos that came out here, Suni, has died, and so we're left with 3.
This really is an incredible creature, Richard, but there is better news, because you do also have a population of southern white rhinos. Now, what's the difference between the two, and what does that population look like here in the country? Okay,
so Kenya has around about 1,000 rhinos in total, very roughly, of which around about 650 are black rhinos, which are indigenous to Kenya, and the rest are southern white rhinos. Just be a little bit careful. Southern white rhinos, of which there are around about 400, and they were originally introduced from southern Africa.
And hence the name southern white rhinos.
Southern white rhinos. So the only difference really between southern white rhinos and northern white rhinos is, well, there's quite a few differences. The kind of morphological differences are difficult to see. So from a kind of body shape perspective, there's not a great deal of difference between them. The northern white rhino is occasionally referred to as the fringe-eared rhino, because it has a fringe around the top of its ear.
Yeah, I can see that.
Socially, however, they're a little bit different. The southern white rhino tends to live in herds. These guys are a little bit more singular. These guys don't favour the open plains quite as much. They're happier in thicker bush. So that's, again, a reflection of the environment within which they evolved. And so they're a little bit different in terms of their habits.
Coming up at the end of April on the 30th is a massive ivory and rhino horn burn being led by the President of Kenya and taking place at the Kenya Wildlife Service headquarters. 1.3 tons of rhino horn is set to be put on fire and destroyed. Is that going to perhaps improve the population of rhinos?
You know, I think long term it might do. It sends a signal to the rest of the world that Africa is getting much more serious now about the preservation of its last remaining wildlife populations, particularly elephants, which across Africa have been absolutely decimated over the past 5 to 10 years. And similarly rhinos, which, you know, the numbers of black rhinos have recovered in recent years but are still very low across Africa. And similarly rhinos have faced massive poaching pressure for their horn in the last 5 years. So it sends a signal to the rest of the world that Africa is no longer prepared to tolerate this. Does it address the demand side of things in the Far East? The answer is not. There are still plenty of people in the Far East who want to buy ivory, who want to buy rhino horn. So just by burning a whole lot of horn and a whole lot of ivory, we don't necessarily diminish the price payable for those commodities, meaning that the incentive for poachers to try to kill these animals remains. And really until such time as the Far East, or demand in the Far East, is diminished, there's always going to be pressure upon these populations.
You know, the only way that these last 3 northern white rhinos are surviving is because they are being so heavily protected and well guarded. Take us through what it takes to ensure that these rhinos are safe here in Ol Pejeta.
So, you know, let me give you some economics to answer that question. It costs us around about $6 million a year to run Ol Pejeta. Now, we raise most of that from tourism and agricultural activities. We estimate it costs between $1.5 and $2 million a year just to protect our rhino populations. Okay, so that's the implications of the poaching threat against them. It requires a massive security operation, which starts at the level of the communities around us first and foremost, with a big community development program that we run. Then we have an electric fence that surrounds the whole property, which is manned on a 24/7 basis.
So these rhinos are protected or manned 24 hours?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. If you have Ol Pejeta has 130 rhinos in total, including the 3 northern white rhinos. And if you're not looking after them on a 24/7 basis, with armed teams of people deployed in the field, with unarmed teams of people acting as eyes and ears deployed in the field, with rhino patrols aiming to see each and every single rhino at least once every 3 days, then you will find your rhinos start to be poached. So that's the level of kind of security that we apply to trying to preserve these animals and to grow the population.
That really is fascinating. There's so much work and effort being put in to protect these species, which really are on the brink of extinction. What is your vision going forward? What is the future of the northern white rhinos?
You know, the truth of the matter is, if you get down to 3 remaining individuals, the chances of saving that species from extinction are almost nil. Now, there are a lot of people working hard to develop what are referred to as artificial reproductive techniques.
Yes, and I'll speak to the vet about that.
Sure. And they're very complex and they're very expensive, and they've never been done successfully before in rhinos. So the chances are the species will go extinct. That's the bottom line. And it may be that it goes extinct and then scientific techniques evolve to allow us to reintroduce the species back onto the planet at some stage in the future. So that's a possibility. But for me, this is just a signal to what humans are doing across the planet. Okay, sure, here we're looking at a big charismatic species, which is a rhino, which everybody can relate to, and it's a tragedy that it's about to go extinct. But it's happening to thousands of other species as a result of human exploitation across the whole planet. So this is really a signal to what we're doing to the rest of the planet. And I think if there's a legacy they can leave, that should be it.
Right. Richard, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And thank you for giving us exclusive access. This again is Sudan, one of the last remaining northern white rhinos on the planet. He is an absolutely fascinating creature, enjoying his late morning snack perhaps, or breakfast.
Late breakfast.
Late breakfast. So the future of this northern white rhino species really does depend on its protection, but also on its health. And now in the distance I can see the veterinarian, that is Stephen, who's joining me to tell me more about the health. Stephen, hi.
Hello.
Good to have you with us. I've just been spending some time here with Sudan, and Richard earlier told us about his health. He's an old male.
Yes, yes, he's very old.
He is. And tell us more about his health. How often do you spend time checking out on the northern whites, and what do you do with regard to that?
Yeah, generally, despite his advanced age, Sudan is generally in good body condition. His appetite is fantastic, his demeanor is great, and he looks like a happy chap. despite the fact that he's advanced in age, and we think that he's got a couple of more years in him.
Yes.
But then we routinely perform veterinary examinations on these animals, specifically Sudan. Basically, I will visit this boma enclosure every day, or sometimes 3 to 4 times a week,
Really?
depending on my schedule. Apart from doing the normal checkup, whereby you will just examine the animal from a distance and then come examine the systems and see if the animal is in good health. There are other tests that we do. We collect blood, we collect fecal samples on a weekly basis, and we perform tests on these samples. On blood, we check for hemoparasites, blood parasites, Babesia, and those tick-borne diseases that affect animals. So, but then we also have tick control or ectoparasite control regimes that we use on Sudan to be able to keep at bay these diseases.
And how would you describe the health of the female rhinos?
The females are also in good health, good body condition. Reproductively, we cannot say they are sound. One of them is reproductively sound, but the other one isn't.
And that's a bit of a challenge, because one might ask, in order to increase this northern white rhino population, why can they not breed? I know Richard mentioned there had been challenges, but there is now a plan and an idea to make a rhino. Tell us more about that. What is that campaign?
That is a campaign, an online campaign to facilitate raising of funds to be able to fund or to support the program, the IVF program. So then the only option that there remains is in vitro fertilization.
That's
to
IVF.
Be able to collect egg cells from the females and sperm from Sudan, fuse the two to form an embryo. This embryo will then be implanted in a surrogate southern white rhino female.
Okay.
So then it is a very costly affair. It is a very costly affair. So that's why we have the Make a Rhino. There is already sperm that was collected previously. Now that we have that sperm, what we do not have is egg cells from the two females.
Okay.
So the plan is to develop techniques that will be able to do the ovum pickup. That's the stage we are at now. So when we get to the ground and collect those eggs, we will go to a laboratory environment and mature the ovum. After maturing that ovum, that's when we'll do the IVF.
Gosh, so a really complex procedure involved in trying to increase this population. But really now that will be possible only if the amount of funds are raised to do so. We certainly hope that that works out, and we will no doubt be following up on that. But let's come back to Sudan here, because I've noticed that his horns have been sawed down. Tell us more about that. Why is it like that?
Yeah, this was previously done as a management practice to be able to keep at bay poachers, because poaching is a nightmare. Yeah. Poaching is a big disaster. It's a war. It's like terrorism.
Of course.
The fight we are fighting is like terrorism. So then trimming the horns reduces the risk of poaching these animals. If you have only one male remaining in the entire universe, the last male standing, a subspecies of the northern white rhino, and then you need to take measures that will ensure protection to its optimum. So that was a management tool, and as you can see, it's growing back.
It certainly is, but it is very tragic that those horns of the rhino had to be sawed down just to protect it from poachers. It just goes to show how bad and how desperate the situation is. But there is hope going forward, because there's a little guy that we're about to meet. Remember, we told you about the southern white rhinos. Well, we're about to meet one. But in the meantime, Stephen, we say bye-bye to Sudan, and thanks very much for your time. All right, let's head on.
Yeah, let's go see the surprise.
This is a very, very special surprise. Who is this baby?
This is Ringo. Ringo is a baby rhino. It's a rhino calf that was abandoned by the mother 6 months ago.
Oh, God.
So our rangers, Zachary Esogon and his team, They collected him. They, in fact, saw him abandoned by the mother, left lifeless, left for dead. They called the veterinary team in, called me in and some other guys. We went and actually saw that the mother had left. And we examined, we saw that there's no way this animal will survive in the bush.
Okay.
Then we mandated by the Kenya Wildlife Service as part of the job to rescue orphaned and abandoned wild animals. We made a decision to take him in. So once we took him in, we discovered that he had a medical condition.
What was that?
It was he was passing urine through his navel.
Oh gosh.
It's called persistent urecas or patent urecas.
Okay, can I
please
try?
go ahead.
Okay, let me we'll carry on with that conversation in just a moment. Oh, Ringo, you're so cute. There you go. So, oh bless, this is Ringo having his morning milk. This is such a fantastic opportunity. But Stephen, Ringo is actually not obviously a northern white rhino, he is a southern white rhino.
Yes, Ringo is a southern white rhino. He's male southern white, and we are hand raising him.
Okay, but after how long will he perhaps be reintroduced with his mother?
After 3 years, 3 to 4 years.
How old is he now?
He's 6 months old.
Ringo, you are...
We will assess the situation and we will be able to gradually and progressively release him into restricted areas like Sudan's area.
Really?
Yes.
Stephen, before I fed Ringo, you were telling me about his medical condition. Expand on that.
Yeah, Ringo, when he was abandoned by the mother and after we picked him up, after feeding him some rehydrant, we realized that he was passing urine through his umbilicus, through his navel. So then this is a congenital problem. This is a congenital malformity whereby the urecus fails to close. Urecus is a tube that connects, is a tube within the umbilical cord that connects the bladder of the unborn baby, or the fetus, to the fetal fluids. So this passes the urine.
So how did this affect his relationship with his mother?
So then this arguably could have led to him being abandoned by the mother, because we found him very weak, dehydrated, could not move, meaning he was not able to suckle because of the pain as a result of what he was going through. So then after consultations with the Kenya Wildlife Service vets, we were able to successfully treat this condition, and it closed up after 2 weeks of treatment.
And how would you describe Ringo's health at the moment?
You can see it. He's
doing well.
He's doing well. You can just see it by the appetite, the bottle of milk. He's taken 2 bottles of milk, and he has a fantastic demeanor. We allow social interaction between him and Sudan for that social enrichment, and it's a good thing for both of them, because then the only other enrichment he has is human,
of course,
which is not ideal.
All right, well,
Yes.
It really goes to show that to an extent the future is bright, at least for the southern white rhinos. Ol Pejeta here is really taking care of Ringo and ensuring that he's in good health. But it certainly is a very different story for the northern white rhinos, as you've heard from both you, Stephen, and also Richard. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. No doubt you have some work to get back to, but we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you.
This is NTV Wild Talk, coming to you from the Ol Pejeta Conservancy. We've just had an incredible time with Sudan and with Ringo. There is still more to come. But remember, this trip has really been made possible thanks to Safari Link airline that flew us down here into the county of Laikipia, and also to the Serena Sweetwater's tented camp that is accommodating us. But before we take that break, here now is your chance to have a wild guess. Our wild guess question is, what are the names of the last 3 northern white rhinos? What are the names of the last 3 northern white rhinos? Use the hashtag NTVWild on Twitter or like our NTV Wild Facebook page and post your answer on the timeline. The first person to answer correctly wins 1 full-board complimentary night for 2 at the incredible Serena Sweetwater's tented camp in Ol Pejeta, courtesy of Serena Hotels. You'll also win a bottle of wine, courtesy of Wines of the World, plus a gift hamper, courtesy of Wildlife Direct. NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi, coming to you from the Ol Pejeta Conservancy here in the county of Laikipia. And this trip has been made possible thanks to Safari Link that flew us in from Nairobi down here, and also to the Serena Sweetwaters tented camp that have accommodated us. Before we continue the conversation, a reminder of our wild guest question. Our wild guess question is, what are the names of the last 3 northern white rhinos? What are the names of the last 3 northern white rhinos? Use the hashtag NTV Wild on Twitter or like our NTV Wild Facebook page and post your answer on the timeline. The first person to answer correctly wins 1 full-board complimentary night for 2 at the incredible Serena Sweetwaters tented camp in Ol Pejeta, courtesy of Serena Hotels. You'll also win a bottle of wine, courtesy of Wines of the World, plus a gift hamper, courtesy of Wildlife Direct. So earlier in the show, we had the opportunity to learn more about the northern white rhinos and also the baby Ringo, the southern white rhino. But here in Ol Pejeta also exists the black rhino. And joining me now is Samuel Mutisia, the wildlife manager here in Ol Pejeta. Samuel, great to see you. Let me let my viewers know that we are standing in the open plains, but we do have security behind us, so we are safe.
Absolutely.
Samuel, now Ol Pejeta is home to the largest sanctuary for black rhinos. First and foremost, what is the difference between a black rhino and a white rhino?
Actually, there's a remarkable difference in the 2 species. You know, the southern white rhino is actually a grazer. So it feeds on grass. It stays fairly much in the open. But the black rhino is actually a very shy animal that browses, and in most cases remains deep in the bushes. You would hardly see it in the plains, and that is actually the 2 main differences. The other difference really is the fact that one is much larger.
Right, and
you know,
which one is larger?
The white rhino actually could grow to up to 3 tons.
Oh wow, and we did of course see Sudan, who was huge.
Massive animal, yes. But the black would probably weigh half of that, which is about 1.5 to about 2 tons, depending on whether you're talking about a male or female. So the 2 are actually different, and they occupy different habitats and territories.
And physically, they also look different too, not only size, but because the white rhino is a grazer, it has a different shaped mouth, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, the name white rhino used to be wide rhino because of the flat sort of big mouth, which is essential for mowing grass. But the black rhino actually has an elongated lip, which enables it to to catch
shrubs
and cut shrubs and all that. So that is another difference.
Now, in terms of the population of the black rhino here in Ol Pejeta, what is it?
We are the largest black rhino sanctuary in East Africa, and we have up to 108 rhinos. And our experience in this field stems way back from 1989, when we only had about 20 animals released between 1989 and 1993. And so those are 27 years of experience with this particular species. And over the years, we have been able to grow these populations, to become the largest in this part of the world.
Well, tell me then, how does Ol Pejeta protect these black rhinos? Because we know overall rhinos are a population under threat. But with regard to the rhinos here in Ol Pejeta, it really is a success story. Like you said, the population has grown. But what do you do to ensure that it's protected?
Keeping these species really is a challenge. I would not say it's not a challenge, because poaching is a real threat. But we have put in place mechanisms to deter and to deal with this sort of menace. As we speak, we have 100 men on ground. We have camps, absolutely. We have camps dotted across the conservancy to be able to monitor these animals for the purposes of biological management. And at the same time, we have men that go out at night, and particularly at night, to ensure that there is no poaching activities or any intrusions for that matter.
So a huge security operation put in place.
Absolutely. You've got to have a daily team out in the ground, and in case of anything you must have teams that are also thoroughly armed and ready to respond. Kenya Wildlife Service is also backing us up. And so it's an operation that is very expensive, but generally when you learn how to do it with training and equipping both by the government as well as locally by ourselves,
Right.
you are able to get around about the challenges that exist.
Okay, now we are here because earlier you spotted a rhino in the distance, and you're going to take us through how you go about protecting and tracking some of these animals. So talk me through it and take us through it.
Absolutely. One of the things is that we will obviously not get very close because these animals
Sure.
are very dangerous
Of
and
course.
they are fierce animals. But basically there are certain things that we look into before even we begin going towards the animal, or
Okay.
even going out looking for it. You have to be very sure of the wind direction.
Oh, really? Why?
Yes, because right now actually the wind is blowing towards us from the animal.
Right.
These animals are very poor eyesight.
Uh-huh.
You could get fairly close and they don't notice you or see you. But if the wind changed direction, you will reckon that they are very good in smelling, because obviously they will notice you're there. They will actually now pay attention to where the smell is coming from. So we tend also not to disturb them as we monitor them. So we keep all precaution.
So now how do we go about it? Because we've
So-
established the wind is blowing this way,
The wind, yes.
and there's a rhino on that side. I
Yes.
can't see it from here, but
Yes.
you've spotted it.
Absolutely. So what we'll do, we will walk close until you see it.
Okay.
We will be very cautious
Okay.
that we always maintain. In bush scenario, you would actually pick twigs or soil,
Right.
and you determine the direction.
Okay.
And that, because sometimes the wind can get very still, and you don't notice, that, and you have to keep checking after every while. Keep checking, and in most cases, actually, we begin by scanning the area.
Okay.
Start from either watering points. Once you get the spores, sometimes you can track the animal bit by bit.
Really?
Up until you either come too close, or if you don't need to come very close because there's nothing of interest, you're checking that animal, you could use a binoculars and scan from a distance, a safer distance.
Okay.
And so it's always necessary actually to ensure that each animal is seen on a daily basis if possible.
On a daily basis?
That becomes very hard, but basically every other 4 days on average we get to see every member of the population.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible, in real dedication in ensuring that these animals are there, they haven't been poached, they haven't died by natural
Yes.
circumstances either. Okay, so we're heading, I can see, I don't know if my camera crew can capture the shots from here, but in the distance,
Yeah.
I can certainly see some rhinos.
There's some 2 rhinos actually lying just ahead of us.
Yes, there they
And actually
are.
all the rhinos here have a name.
Really?
Yes.
All of them?
All of them. And that particular one is called Tamu
Okay.
and Mercy.
And how do you know that?
It's because every rhino actually has unique marks on the
Okay,
ears,
right,
notches.
yeah.
Those notches are unique to every individual. And so we know our rhinos individually.
Okay.
And therefore the name then is associated with a particular animal, and every data we collect is of that animal.
So Mercy must be a female, obviously, and
Yes.
what's Tamu?
Tamu is a female as well,
Oh,
because
okay.
obviously that's a mother and a calf.
Really?
Usually these animals tend to be solitary and very territorial in nature.
Okay.
You would have, the mother and a calf, and maybe the older calf living together as a family. But males tend to protect their area. So we have a general idea where each animal stays within Ol
Right,
Pejeta.
right.
And so even at any one given time, we would guess by location. But we need to verify by moving closer.
And I also noticed that, Samuel, you've toned down your voice. I think I better too, because obviously we don't want to disturb the rhinos. Oh, and one has actually just gotten up.
Absolutely, and that should be the young one.
Yes, it looks rather small.
You know what is interesting about that animal? The animal is headed to about 2.5 years.
Okay.
By the time she's 3.5, she will leave the mother.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm sure the mother will be calving or will have just calved down.
Oh, God.
And can only be accepted later once the smaller calf has grown to a certain level where the mother doesn't feel that this other one is a threat to the young one.
You mentioned something about notching. How often is the notching exercise, and what exactly does it achieve?
The notching is a very essential part of population management, because essentially you make every animal identifiable to every person that is monitoring these animals. And so essentially notching should happen ideally on a yearly basis. But sometimes, because of the massive resources required, we do that every other 2 years. For example, this year we intend to notch up to 20 animals plus,
Okay.
which is an expensive business. But that is important if you are to generate data and manage these species at individual level.
Okay. So once you get this close, then what do you do next in terms of tracking them?
What normally happens at this point, you may find animals that are asleep like that, that are lying down.
Yeah.
You don't want to disturb them. So you'd pick up binoculars, zoom in on the ears, make a clear ID of what animal that is.
Okay.
If it's an animal that you thought you had seen limping or probably injured, then at some point you'll be forced to have them stand.
Oh.
Now by just a simple clap,
Yeah.
that animal could stand.
Okay.
And you will judge the manner in which it stands up. It's the attention it pays to the environment.
Really?
Usually a sick animal will not do that.
Okay.
If you clap a second time, a normal animal will tend to run away.
Okay.
If this animal is injured, you will realize that it's adamant to move. And that becomes the onset of process of getting it treated.
Samuel, all of that is just so interesting to learn in terms of how Ol Pejeta protects these black rhinos. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now, while the population of black rhinos here in Ol Pejeta is certainly growing and is protected, it still is a population under threat across the country and across the world. And in just a moment, we're going to learn more about that. Now, I am with Ben Okita. He is a rhino specialist from the IUCN Africa Rhino Specialist Group. Ben, great to be with you.
Thank you.
And we are getting closer to the rhinos. We've had the opportunity to come a little bit closer, and there they are in the background. We still do have our security with us, so it's important to note that. Ben, these rhinos here in Ol Pejeta are a growing population.
Yeah.
But if we look at the bigger picture of rhinos in Kenya, how well or how badly are we doing?
If you look at the bigger picture, rhino conservation in Kenya, we're doing well so far compared to other rhino range states. We are the third largest population when it comes to rhinos across Africa.
What is the population?
So we are talking about 1,100 animals. Out of 1,100 animals, about 700 are black rhinos and about 400 are white rhinos. So those black rhinos, only 700 of them are remaining in the country.
Wow.
Yeah? But I could say that it's been a great success, not just for Ol Pejeta, but in country as a general. If you remember the history of rhino conservation in this country in the 1960s, 1970s, we're talking of about 20,000 rhinos in the country. Yeah, but then that dwindled to less than 300, and from efforts that have been made by the government, the private sector, the communities, we've grown that population from a low of 300 now to about 700.
So it is impressive, and I'll just remind our viewers that these rhinos in the background are the same rhinos that we saw earlier with Samuel, the wildlife manager of Ol Pejeta. They're being good to us. They're still just resting. While the population is in a good place, as you say, it is still a population under threat. What is the major threat that faces rhinos here in Kenya?
Yeah, the major threat that faces the rhinos in Kenya is poaching for its own. So that's number one threat. And this poaching for the own, the demand is not actually within Kenya, but is outside in the Asian countries.
Right.
They're used for various reasons, which, as baseless purposes.
Yes, as we heard with Richard earlier.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's based on beliefs, it's based on myths, and it's based on facts which are not factual, not scientific at all. So that's one major threat. The other threat is the fact that we may not have very secure areas, because there's all this demand for rhino horn. You've got to protect them, and you've got smaller areas where they're enclosed, like now in Ol Pejeta, fenced areas, but it reaches a point where you've got to move them out of those fenced areas to larger areas. So we're talking of places like Tsavo, for example.
Right.
So if you have Tsavo is huge lands, 20,000 square kilometers. So how do you protect those areas? So it's a major challenge. So the government has to come in, put in resources in terms of people and equipment, how to monitor those areas, protect them, etc. And that's a challenge. Yeah, so So when it comes to protecting those large areas, is a huge challenge, but also just land for them.
Yeah, enough space
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
human population
Human
growth
population is
and
encroaching
development.
and developing and encroaching and fragmenting these habitats.
Yeah.
So you're talking of, let's say, now Ol Pejeta here, for example. Yeah, if it were an ideal situation, then you'll have Ol Pejeta linked to, let's say, Ol Jogi, which is just neighboring.
Right.
And Borana, for example, where there are also rhinos. So rhinos will move across. But because of that fragmentation, yeah, you are forced to just enclose them
Yeah,
in
well,
small areas.
well, from your perspective, is enough being done to protect the population that still exists? We know the northern white rhinos are almost extinct. Within a few years, when they die, if the IVF doesn't work, we'll no longer have them on the planet. So really, does the world realize, and is it doing enough?
Yeah, it is a pity now that you mentioned the northern white. Only 3 are remaining in the wild that you know about. But then in terms of what is being done, I would say there is still room for improvement, especially when it comes to allocation of resources, because these animals require heavy investment to protect them, to make sure that they're breeding well, and to make sure that they are contributing to the tourism industry, which is a major player in our economy. Yeah, so if the government could still pump in more resources, they are already doing that, that would be excellent. The other thing that has also happened that I talked about earlier, which is the major threat, which is poaching for the horn.
Yeah.
We had legislation and penalties which were weak, and that would make people just do the poaching. Now we have a new Wildlife Act.
Yes.
Yeah, 2-3 years now old, which has punitive penalties. Yeah, so that also is a major effort, nationally.
And is there any
Yeah.
sort of plan in place to protect rhinos?
Yeah,
A management plan?
Yeah, there is a national plan. You have to protect rhinos, and we review this every 5 years. So this national plan is basically centered on how do we do the protection, how do you do the biology, because we want them to give birth as quickly as possible.
Of course, yeah.
So how do you do the biology? How do you expand range? How do you involve communities? How do you look for resources? So there's a plan that is done at a national level, brings together all the stakeholders, the private sector, the government, the communities. They all come together to do that plan. So that is the plan that is guiding us now. It's due for revision by end of this year.
Right, okay. These creatures are so precious, and as we've mentioned before, they are under threat because poachers are after their horns, rhino horn, which really has no value to it. It's made out of the same thing as fingernails. Coming up is the ivory burn and rhino horn burn at the end of April.
Yeah.
What do you think this signifies? As a conservationist, is it going to help our rhino populations?
Yeah, the upcoming ban, I think, is a major statement that Kenya is making to the entire world.
Oh.
And it's not the first time that we made this statement. In the 1980s, then President Moi, banned quite a number of tusks and rhino horns. And the statement that the government is making is that we don't value dead products. Yeah, we value live animals than the dead.
Well,
So,
that's from a government's perspective,
Yeah.
and you're right, it is sending out that message.
Yeah.
But is it going to trickle down to the man on the ground, the poacher on the ground, who's actually making that kill?
Yeah, this will trickle down in the sense that once that statement is made out there, then people who
Are involved.
or want to understand will see there's no value in this kind of stuff. Why are we wasting our time trading in it? And if we can have similar kind of bans, happening across Africa and happening in other countries, like we've
Right.
seen in America and
Yes, and
in some
Italy
other-
recently crushed ivory as well.
even in China it happened. If that can, be spread out and cascade all over, then it is a strong message that the world is sending that you better conserve the live than focus on the dead.
Ben, what is your feeling about the future? Is it bright? We've got one area where it's really tragic. You have the last 3 remaining northern white rhinos on the planet. And I keep repeating that because really that people need to be aware of that. 3 and they're done and we're done. We have the black rhino population, which is growing at a steady pace. But overall, when you look at it, how would you describe the future?
The future is bright. Yeah, it is bright, but there's still a lot of hurdles to overcome. Yeah, I'm saying it is bright because if you look at the population numbers that we had about 20 years ago, you're like about 300 rhinos that remained following a heavy poaching incidences. Now we are talking of 700. That in itself is positive. And if you look at the last 5 years, we've had huge, serious poaching happening. And in the last 2 years alone in Kenya, we have seen that poaching reduce drastically. So that in itself, to me, makes me have hope that there's that bright future. The numbers are growing, and poaching levels also we are seeing going down. And we've got a lot of awareness campaigns that are going around the world, and we've got new generation that is coming up, the young generation who believe in conservation and do value environment, etc. So that makes it, like, yes, the future will be bright. There's some brightness I can see.
All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much. And that is a perfect way to end on a hopeful, optimistic note. While the future is bright, as Ben says, still more needs to be done, and awareness is, of course, very keen. And now here's what's coming up on the NTV Wild documentary series on Saturday night.
Derek and Beverly Joubert are many things. Award-winning filmmakers, explorers, and dedicated conservationists. Now, they've set their sights once again on the elephants of Botswana.
There is a saying in Africa that when two elephants fight, it's the ground beneath them that suffers the most.
Journey with the Jouberts to one of the most remote places in Africa, where they'll explore one of the last remaining herds of elephants and contemplate the inner lives of these iconic creatures.
What is the very soul of the elephant?
Now, the future of the northern white rhinos really is uncertain. Whether or not the population will grow from just the 3 to any more really is unknown. And here, this rhino cemetery in Ol Pejeta really serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating threat that faces rhinos, that is poaching. But no doubt there is optimism that overall Kenya's rhino population will continue to grow. And that's where we leave it on NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. We're grateful to Safari Link for flying us down here, and also to the Serena Sweetwaters Tented Camp for accommodating us. See you again next Tuesday, 10 p.m.